South African chef, author and editor Dora Sitole has died. Sitole was the first black food editor in South Africa, serving at the helm of True Love magazine. Sitole published her book called 40 Years of Iconic Food last year. Joining us to discuss this is Asanda Sizani, former editor-in-chief of Glamour magazine and former fashion director of ELLE magazine. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time. It certainly, has been shocking and really sad to learn of the passing of Dora. What are some of the memories, Asanda, that you carry with her because I know that you've interviewed her quite recently.
Yes, I'm shocked, devastated. Today is a very sad day for all of us who loved and respected Dora. Especially someone like me that followed her career in magazine publishing. One of the fondest memories I have of her is, recently the interview I had with her during lockdown, where we reflected on her career in magazine publishing. She was an editor at True Love magazine for 25 years. What a legacy, her contributions in the publishing space. It's something to really admire, and she was very generous with insights into the industry. She talked at length about her career journey and her challenges in the industry, but also we got an opportunity to celebrate her successes and her many wonderful stories and beautiful covers that she managed to produce for all of us to marvel at and to enjoy.
And quite a number of people have actually spoken about what you're talking about, the fact that she had such a wealth of knowledge. She had so many doors that she had kicked open and was able to walk through and had really cemented herself in this industry. But she was not selfish with her knowledge.
No, absolutely. She was always willing to share. She was so motivating. She was so supportive. She wanted to know what the new generation of content producers, writers, editors, foodies are doing. She was very curious about that and followed everyone, and she was always ready to applaud you, to celebrate you, to say well done on this, or just someone like that is so rare to have in this industry. And she was that mother figure. She took it upon herself to play an almost mentorship role at the same time. If you asked her for any advice, as a young editor in the magazine publishing industry, she was always willing to share any knowledge and any advice that she has as someone that has walked the path.
And Asanda, I'm going to ask you just to pause there for now. I do have someone else whose life was really touched by Dora's life, and certainly hers is another special story of just the contribution that Dora has made in this particular industry, and that is Siba Mtongana, who is the host of Siba's Table on the Food Network. Siba, Dora played a huge role in your career. She's someone that, you don't know from a distance, but you know quite closely.
Very closely, in fact. She was very pivotal in my early days of being a food editor at Dora magazine. She was, at the time, the True Love food editor. And I remember, there were lots of frustrations at that time, not necessarily with the job itself and what we did and the content, but rather how to maneuver yourself well in a corporate space, in a very challenging sector in terms of growth, etc. More specifically, being a young Black woman at the time. And I remember I was based in Cape Town and she was based in Johannesburg. And I used to have such lengthy conversations with her. And one of the things Dora would say is like, Siba, no. Do it, but perhaps do it like that. So she was she mothered and mentored me for a period of time, which I'll forever be grateful for. And she was one person whom I could say to my parents, look, this is Dora is doing this, and this is also what I'm doing, because you must remember, food was not even a trend at the time, and food was not a big thing at the time. So she was one Black woman I could model my food, especially in print specifically, and magazines towards. And as Asanda said, very generous with information. She has a wealth of wisdom, so loving Mom Dora. She'll take you in as your own. In actual fact, Asanda and I were in Cape Town while she was fashion editor in a drama magazine. So we knew her quite well.
And Siba, was it easy to convince your parents that, Mom Dora is doing this and therefore I am now going to do it as well? Because as you mentioned, that particular moment of speaking to your parents, I also cannot even help but think of the many young Black women that were cutting out those recipes that would be prepared in the magazines by her, and certainly starting to look at a possible career in this industry.
It was not easy to convince my parents, and to be honest, there were not people who really followed my magazines. My sisters and I were, so it still was a far-fetched thing, but at least it gave them some form of comfort as in, oh, okay, there's someone who does this, who is Black like me, if I may call it that, and who was very successful at it. So, Mom Dora, oh my goodness, Mom Dora was such a loving and a person who was so generous with the information. So we'll forever remember that. And very well invested in the youth, so well invested in the youth. And you must remember, we were working for competing magazines. So for me to call her up and say, I'm struggling with this in terms of, being in corporate, etc., and for her to freely advise just shows how much generous she was, because she could have chosen otherwise.
And Asanda, when you look at Mom Dora, I had the privilege of sitting down with her in November. One of the things that is really what was glaring about her, and what Siba just mentioned now, is that for her, she didn't have this notion of being someone that paved the way, someone that started in this industry, therefore things must work according to her. But she drew young people in to this particular career path and understood that she's actually paving a multi-generational way.
She had no effing graces. She had no ego about her, zero arrogance for someone that is so accomplished, and that in itself is something to admire. She was an example for us. She was the blueprint for foodies, for, again, us in the magazine publishing industry in general, in just how you conduct yourself, in how you carve a path for yourself. She showed us what longevity and excellence looks like, and in that, she also was very eager to pull others up with her. She wanted to see the growth of an industry. She wanted a whole generation of young Black women, all women, occupying their spaces and being excellent at it.
And Siba, when you look at, I'll now call it her last offering, which was the 40 years of iconic food. It really, when you go through it, it's more than food. It's actually her sharing a piece of herself with us, the readers, to understand her better and to understand when her palate was formed, to understand who she was. But when you read that book, her love for family was really something that radiated through as well.
It's so true. And in actual fact, we've had many conversations with her, whether it's just me calling and checking up or whatever the conversation might be. She really loved her children. She really loved her husband. And for instance, there was one time where she was very happy of having a grandchild, her very first grandchild. That was such a big moment for her. I remember having a call, and she was a very light individual, and you would literally see her smile through her voice or hear her smile through her voice. Really enjoyed spending that time with family and so on. And one of the things that really were quite hard also on her was having to lose her husband, which was a death that happened very suddenly, which was quite sad. But Umam D was a person who was able to forge forward, and that she did with such beauty and pizzazz in her own quiet way. And I think now that I, have had the time to reflect, she left us with such a beautiful grand ending, because we've got this beautiful book that we can all purchase and buy or have as part of her legacy, having fully understood her story from her, not necessarily us putting pieces together, but she told her story the way she wanted to tell it. And I think that's a very beautiful piece that we as South Africans should have. And I think more specifically, people who are in the food industry. So if people don't have the book already, I think you should most certainly have it.
And Asanda, what advice from Mum Dora do you treasure the most?
I treasure her sharing with me how, as an editor, you need to stand your ground. You need to fight for your decision or your vision to be heard. And that is actually, such important advice to impart, especially, if you're young and maybe you think the role is too big and you have a little bit of imposter syndrome and you realize how big this opportunity is. Sometimes you doubt yourself. But she was that person that really wanted to make sure people believe in their vision and are not afraid to stand their ground to fight for it. She was just so confident in herself, but again, in the most humble and the most gracious way possible. It really is such an unbelievable loss to all of us as an industry. This is a woman that worked in the magazine space from the 1980s. In South Africa. So you can only imagine what she's seen, what she's contributed at the same time. So her wealth of knowledge comes from a place of really having experienced a lot in her life journey and also putting that on the pages of her magazine and in her books, and also helping everyone that she meets along the way through knowledge and all the information that she so willingly shared with all of us.
And Siba, as a final word from you, how will you remember her?
Oh, I'd remember her with her smiles, her laughter, and her loads of advices. You knew if you spoke to Mum Dora, she'll most certainly be able to guide you on certain things. And also, as Asanda has said, she was very, very confident, but in a quiet way. And I remember one of the times when when I got onto Food Network and I was telling her, oh my God, she is such a big platform. How will I be able to, to handle it all? She just looked me straight in the eye and said, baby girl, they came to you. So, stop feeling small or stop this and that, So I love that about her, and I'll forever cherish the times and the moments that she contributed in my life.
Thank you so much to you both for such heartwarming memories of Mum Dora. Certainly we do appreciate it. That was host and food editor of Siba's Table on the Food Network, Siba Mtongana, and Asanda Sizani, former editor-in-chief of Glamour magazine and former fashion director of ELLE magazine.